Hi everyone, welcome to Ask Wardee. I have a jar here of cold brew coffee today because we're going to talk about if cold brew coffee is healthy or not. This is a follow-up to last week's episode when we were talking about healthy coffee in general. Nancy said, what about cold brew? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm really happy you're all here joining me for Ask Wardee. Ask Wardee is the weekly show where I answer your questions about traditional cooking. Here we go, cold brew coffee. And right now it's a very wintry cold day, but you know what? Cold brew iced coffee is good any day if you ask me. So let's talk about it. Nancy's question was, thanks for the valuable information on last week's episode about healthy coffee, which by the way was episode 124. So just go to askwardee.tv and you'll see that episode there. She says, can you advise on cold brewed coffee? Up and downsides. Thanks. Well, thank you for the question, Nancy. And it's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. And you get a free gift for your question being featured on an episode of Ask Wardee. So I'll make that offer to anybody else who submits a question that we answer. And we've already been in touch with Nancy about her gift. And also Nancy and anybody who's listening wants to read along, bookmark this or save it or share it. The complete transcript is at askwardee.tv. Look for episode 125. Okay, so cold brew coffee. What is it anyway? Just really quickly have to cover it because it's not just coffee that got cold. It's coffee that's specially brewed cold. You combine the coffee grounds and cold or room temperature water and you let them steep in the refrigerator for 12 hours or longer to get a thick kind of coffee concentrate. And it was done in the cold. And it has some great benefits. The taste is sweeter, smoother, not bitter. And that's because the fact that it's brewed cold means that some of those bitter compounds and things that would otherwise be transferred in warm conditions simply don't transfer into the water because it's done cold. So it makes it really ideal for sweet beverages. You know, think of iced coffees. It makes it ideal because it's not bitter. It's just smooth and sweet. And it's really great warmed up and drank hot too, so don't think you can't use it for that. So that's what cold brew coffee is. Is it healthy? Well, just quickly to summarize the criteria we came up with in last week's Ask Wardee, episode 124. Assuming that your coffee is Arabica beans, because they have less caffeine, that you've used Swiss water processed decaf, which is very, very effective and also doesn't destroy the coffee beans in the process. And also that you're getting organic / fair trade coffee beans, that your beans are fairly fresh from roasting, whether you do it yourself or you get it from a local coffee shop where they're roasting fresh and having very fresh coffee on the shelves, and that you're grinding it kind of when you make your coffee. So assuming all those things that we talked about last week, then cold brew coffee is healthy, yes. Now, do keep in mind there are some people who shouldn't drink coffee, and if that's you, you probably know that's you. You're healing your gut or you have some other underlying issue. So I'm not saying that cold brew coffee is healthy for everyone, but cold brew coffee is no different than hot brew coffee with the things that we discussed last week. Now, there is one key difference between cold brew and hot brew that I think we should talk about, and that is that cold brew coffee may contain less caffeine, and that's because the brewing of cold brew imparts less caffeine into the mixture. Now we're starting with Swiss water processed decaf beans anyway, which have 99.9% reduction, but it just means if you're making cold brew that you have virtually none in your coffee, because if there is any left in the beans, the cold inhibits the caffeine from making it into the mixture. Make sense? So I think that's worth talking about. And so, basically my bottom line is I think cold brew can be healthy if you're doing it the way that we're talking about. Drinking it in moderation or maybe even more frequently than that. If you don't have any health issues, it can be very healthy. How to make it. So I promised you all that we talked today about how to make it. So you have to play around with the strength of your concoction. But what I've got here to show you today is a finished cold brew. We're going to strain it together. And it would be considered a concentrate. So it's ideal for mixing with cream or milk or even diluting with ice or water. And so you can make it in a concentrate and it can be very compact in your refrigerator. But the ratio is very important, and a starting place that I would suggest is 4-to-1. 4 cups of water to 1 cup beans, or 4 parts water to 1 cup beans. You can even go as high as 2-to-1, so half as many beans as water, but you want to play with that to get the flavor that you enjoy, that you like. And so in my example here, I've done 4-to-1. And so I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. So the first thing is you're going to grind your coffee beans, and you want to coarse grind. And this, I didn't have this last week, but this is my daughter Hania's and her husband's ceramic hand crank coffee grinder. And it's ceramic burrs. They also have an electric burr coffee grinder, and these are much better than the ones with blades. So I have it here, and you just crank and grind your beans. Okay? And they will fall into this chamber, and it's really fun, and our grandson loves to do it. So you can see the beans there in the bottom, and they're fairly coarse. That's how you want them. You don't want them fine. And then you need a cup of them, and you put a cup in a quart jar, and then you fill the rest with water. You give it a stir, you cap it, and you put it in the fridge for 12 hours or longer. It can go 24, and you will get this rich coffee concentrate, okay? And now it's time to strain. And I showed you last week our Chemex, which has the paper filter. And this just makes a great filter for cold brew coffee. So I use it because we have it. But you could use cheesecloth through a colander. You can use another, if you have other paper filters for other coffee makers. The point is you need to filter this to strain it. And this filter is paper, and it's going to take more time to filter this than it would through like a cheesecloth. So I'll just let it work there, and you may have to use a spoon to kind of help it, but basically you can see your cold brew is now filtering into this. Isn't that awesome? And while it's doing that, I am going to talk about the one downside of cold brew coffee. And if you were paying attention to the recipe, then you probably already guessed what it is. It is that it's more expensive, because cup for cup, you need more ground coffee than with hot brew. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't really have to do with health, this reason. It just has to do with the expense of it. And so go into it with your eyes wide open. And there are certain benefits, like we talked about. You get a sweeter, smoother coffee as a result. That's great in iced beverages. So just be aware it's more expensive. For myself, after preparing this episode, I just really fell in love with cold brew all over again, and I think I'm going to be doing it more often. Not because I want to spend more money, but because I really like the end result. When hot summer comes, there's just nothing better, right? I told you last week I love the smell and the taste of coffee. If you watched last week's episode and you're watching this week, then you may have in the back of your head another one that you're thinking of, and I want to address it right now. And it's the fact that, as I told you last week, this paper filter prevents diterpenes from entering your brew. And diterpenes are what people say lead to high cholesterol. And the whole cholesterol issue is another issue, which, as we know in traditional cooking circles, that high cholesterol isn't necessarily the problem. It's the symptom our bodies are showing of an underlying problem. So if by attacking the cholesterol, you're not really solving the problem. So I would argue that, even if the diterpenes cause high cholesterol, that perhaps that person needs to avoid coffee for another reason, or there's an underlying inflammation or something going on that should be addressed. But if we just take it at face value that the diterpenes cause higher cholesterol and that the paper filter blocks them out, then you look at this, and this coffee steeped just grounds and water with no paper or cloth. You can use a cloth, a filter, no barrier to the diterpenes entering the water. Well, there is not proof out there, but there's at least speculation that because the diterpenes are fat soluble, that they need heat really to be released. And since this is a cold process, that possibly the diterpenes are not released into the liquid. Now, this is just conjecture that I read. I didn't find any absolute proof about it. I'm just throwing it out there that it's an issue that probably would have to be resolved. For my purposes, I'm not that concerned about it. And let's say they are in the mixture, then when you filter through paper or cloth to get your final mixture, perhaps the diterpenes are inhibited there. So I don't really think it's a downside, but I don't have proof. Okay, so this is going to continue to filter, and I'm going to continue and show you how to make this recipe. So let's just say the whole thing is filtered. There's a little bit left in here. Is there something over there? Yeah, thank you. My son's going to get a bowl that I didn't get. And while we're doing that, a few more drops are going to enter my thing. So you would continue and you'd strain the whole thing, but I want to show you how to make this beverage. And it smells super good. There is no lost flavor or aroma here. And it is quite dark, so it is a concentrate. And so I'm going to show you a great way to dilute it. Thank you so much. All right, so this would be discarded. Compost is great. It doesn't need to go to waste. Whatever you do with your coffee. Cold brew coffee is ideal for mixing into iced beverages and diluting with milk, cream, ice. So I've got a glass here with ice. And if anyone here follows Trim Healthy Mama, you're going to love this beverage because I'm going to make this Trim Healthy Mama friendly. So I've got liquid stevia here. I'll put like half dropper full. Pour my coffee. I'll go about 2/3 of the way, or whatever I have here I'll do. There we go. Look how good that looks. Super, doesn't it? Now, you would use milk or cream. I have cashew milk here. That's what makes it Trim Healthy Mama friendly, because it does not have the sugar. So pour in my cashew milk. Oh man, doesn't that look good? Doesn't it? My son is saying, yep, that looks good. Although I love those swirls in there, don't you? I'm going to give it a stir. And I wish I could share, but you all just finish this episode and go make yourself some cold brew right now. Wow, that is so good. For me, the ratio of 4:1 is great, but if you like stronger or you want more of a concentrate to go further, to dilute more, have at it and do a ratio of 2:1, which means you put 2 cups of grinds in your jar with the 4 cups of water. So Nancy S., those are the ups and downs of cold brew coffee. I think it's a great option. If you are okay with drinking coffee and you do it as healthy as we talked about, then enjoy cold brew. And you have convinced me to try it more often because of preparing this episode, as I said. For more coffee info, I did go into all those different criteria that I talked about today. I went into it last week. That's episode 124. You can find it at askwardee.tv. Episode 124. If you want to recap and the recipe that I've just showed you today, it's askwardee.tv. Look for episode 125. That's particularly about cold brew. Also, my daughter Hania wrote a very comprehensive article on coffee and caffeine. She goes way more into the science of it and about the caffeine and health effects and everything. And I've summarized some of that information for these episodes, but if you are into the science or really want to dig deeper, then I have a link for you at the transcript, askwardee.tv, episode 124 or 125 have a link to that if you want to read more. If you have any other questions or comments about cold brew or coffee, please add them to the episode transcript and notes. You'll find a spot to leave your comments at askwardee.tv. If you have a question for a future episode, as I said at the top of the hour, you do get a gift if I answer it. So you can submit that by sending me an email, wardee@askwardee.tv, and my name is right there, Wardee. And I'm just going to wrap up with a final invitation that if you're interested in traditional cooking, which in traditional cooking, you make foods more nutritious and digestible, not by spending more time, but by being smart about the methods you use. And they do make foods more nutritious and digestible, can heal digestion, heal your gut, ease a lot of the aches and pains you may be having, can reverse cavities, and so much more. And so I have a free video series to introduce you to some fundamental concepts in traditional cooking. You can get that at treadcookschool.com/freevids, FREEVIDS, which is all one word. Oh, and no Ask Wardee next week. So we're gonna have a break for 1 week because I have another engagement, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. See you then, same time, same place. God bless you all. Bye-bye.